Sky News has discovered that hundreds of sex offenders are disappearing into our communities, disguising themselves from detection through a process that takes 15 minutes online. This little girl, Della, was abused by a man who moved into her house. At that time, in the early 1980s, his name was Terry Price.
I was always dancing. I loved Top of the Pops, and I would always have, my mum had a little record player that I would take up to a room and play all the records and stuff. So you'd make it into a game of, now you can start stripping off, taking your clothes off to the music and stuff, and I obviously had no idea what that was. So that's how it started. It just quickly progressed anyway, and it was full on rape.
Yeah. And how old were you?
6.
So he raped you when you were 6 years old?
Yeah.
Price was later convicted of raping someone else, and years later Della found the strength to go to the police about what happened to her. But it turned out Terry Price had changed his identity.
The officer saying, "Oh, we think we've got Terry, but that's not his name anymore." Right. So okay, so what's his name now? By that time he changed it to Robert McEwen.
Robert McEwen was also a convicted sex offender. Indeed, since abusing Della, Terry Price changed his name by deed poll 5 times, committing new offences with his new identities. Raising the question, what's the point of the sex offenders register if you can simply become someone else?
How many other relationships has he had? How many other jobs has he been able to get around children?
Here's how it works. First, complete your application online. It only takes a few minutes.
It's advertised as ridiculously simple to do.
Keep in mind you'll want them when changing your name with the DVLA, Passport Office, credit card providers, banks and more.
The Safeguarding Alliance put in freedom of information requests to the 43 police forces of England and Wales about sex offenders using this deed poll service to change their names. Half of them returned no data, but from those that did, there were 1,349 sex offenders who'd notified the authorities of a name change. But then they asked how many sex offenders are missing. Only 16 forces provided data, but it amounted to more than 900 offenders, and many may have changed their names without informing authorities.
When they change their name by deed poll, they essentially go under the radar of all authorities. They can obtain a new passport, they can obtain a new driving licence, and essentially they can erase their past.
The Safeguarding Alliance asked the Disclosure and Barring Service how they guard against this. They replied, the DBS does not undertake any background checks regarding applicants changing their name by deed poll. So what then about laws put in place to allow people to check on the history of people you don't know, either working with children or a new boyfriend moving into your house?
Clare's law, Sarah's law. You realise that they're actually redundant now. If you go and ask, has Joe Bloggs got a history? No, he hasn't, because his name was Dave Jones yesterday.
It makes a complete mockery of the legal system. It makes a complete mockery of everything, and actually it renders the law completely redundant.
MP Robert Halfon wants this debated in Parliament, but got this answer.
Crucially, the failure of a sex offender to tell police of a name change within 3 days is a criminal offence with a maximum prison sentence of 5 years. So although it may be easy for people to change their name, it is illegal and the penalty is quite severe.
The crux of the matter is that the onus lies on the offender to tell the truth. And in actual matter of fact, it's a far lesser sentence for a failure to notify than it is for the crimes that they're committing.
We've found dozens of cases where the names have changed, but the offenders and their crimes have been the same. Manipulative by nature, Della's attacker even changed his name again to disrupt her trial. She found out from her liaison officer.
She phoned me on the afternoon and said, oh, he hasn't been able to enter a plea. I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, it's all set up. What do you mean? She said he's changed his name.
So he'd filled out a form online,
prison.
depolled, changed his name, and now he can't enter a plea.
Yeah.
So it's just disrupting the process.
He can't enter a plea because they're putting the charges to him and it's not his name anymore.
Now called Mr. Mac, he was eventually convicted. The Home Office has told us it's working with the courts and DBS to ensure measures are strengthened, and continuously reviewed in order to protect the public. Victims say the answer is simple: don't allow sex offenders to change their names. Jason Farrell, Sky News.